Merger of Hearts, Chapter 1. The Accusation. Welcome back to the Worthington Chronicles, where every story is a new adventure. If you're loving our tales of romance and redemption, do us a huge favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with a friend who needs a happy escape. Now, let's begin our next story. Locke didn't just enter a room, she commanded it. In the sleek modern conference hall of VentureX partners, all eyes were on her. At 32, she was the most sought-after corporate investigator in the business, a reputation built on a foundation of razor-sharp intellect and unshakable ethics. The data doesn't lie, she stated, her voice clear and cutting as she clicked to the final slide. A complex web of financial transactions lit up the screen behind her. The shell companies, the funneled funds, it all leads back to Stonewall. Industry's expansion in the Asian markets. The pattern indicates either willful ignorance at the highest level or deliberate fraud. Her client, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, nodded gravely. And the CEO, Graham Stonewall? Piper's gaze was unwavering. She had studied Graham Stonewall, his charming smile in Forbes, his reputation as a charismatic CEO whisperer. It all felt like a carefully constructed facade. A company's culture is set from the top. At best, he's incompetent, allowing this corruption to flourish under his nose. At worst, he's complicit. That evening, at an opulent industry gala, she saw her chance. Spotting Graham Stonewall across the crowded ballroom, laughing with a group of investors, a surge of righteous anger propelled her forward. He was the picture of effortless success. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a smile that seemed to draw all the light in the room. She stepped into his circle, the chatter dying down. Mr. Stonewall, Piper Locke, of Lumina Solutions. His smile remained, but it became cautious. Ms. Locke, I've heard the name. It's a pleasure. The pleasure is mine, she said, her tone icy. I was just explaining to my clients at VentureX the creative accounting practices your company employs in its overseas divisions, the ones linked to that former executive you so conveniently fired. The air around them froze. Graham's smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. His eyes, a startling shade of hazel, locked with hers, and she saw no guilt in them. Instead, she saw a flash of something far more disconcerting. A deep, personal betrayal, as if she had struck him across the face. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Piper held her ground, but a cold trickle of doubt wormed its way into her. Certainty. This wasn't the reaction of a guilty man. This was the reaction of a man who had just been blindsided. Before he could form a word, she turned on her heel and walked away, the whispers erupting behind her. She had made her accusation. The battle lines were drawn. But as she left the ballroom, her heart pounding, the image of Graham Stonewall's wounded, furious eyes was all she could see. If you're enjoying this new story of corporate intrigue and clashing hearts, please support our channel. Liking this video and subscribing to the Worthington Chronicles helps us bring you more full-length stories. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from Chapter 2. The Challenge. The fallout was immediate and brutal. By morning, news channels were buzzing with Piper's accusation. Stonewall Industries' stock price dipped, and industry forums lit up with speculation. Piper's phone buzzed constantly with calls from journalists, but she ignored them all, focusing instead on preparing her full report for the VentureX board. Meanwhile, across the city, Graham Stonewall faced a different kind of storm. His board of directors was demanding answers. Sitting at the head of a polished mahogany table, he faced 7 pairs of concerned eyes. These allegations are damaging, Graham, said Sarah Chen, the lead independent director. Our credibility is our most valuable asset. Graham's expression was grim but determined. I understand the concern, Sarah, but I have nothing to hide. In fact, he paused, a bold idea forming. I'm going to invite our accuser inside. His legal counsel sputtered. That's unprecedented and risky. It's necessary, Graham countered. Piper Locke built her reputation on finding truth. So let's show her the truth. All of it. That afternoon, an email arrived in Piper's inbox that made her breath catch. The sender was Graham Stonewall himself. The subject line read, "An invitation to verify the truth." The message was direct and startlingly transparent. Graham proposed granting Piper and her Lumina Solutions team full, unfettered access to Stonewall Industries' records, personnel, and facilities for a period of 30 days. No restrictions, no redactions. "You've made serious allegations based on external data," he wrote. "I challenge you to examine the internal reality. If you find evidence of wrongdoing, I will resign immediately. If you don't, you will publicly retract your statements and clear my company's name." Piper read the message 3 times, her mind racing. It was either the boldest move an innocent man could make, or the most arrogant bluff of a guilty one. Her team was divided. "This could be a trap," Mark warned. "He might be setting us up to look incompetent. Or he's genuinely confident there's nothing to find," countered another analyst. Piper made her decision. She would accept the challenge, not just for her client, but for her own professional integrity. She needed to know if the doubt gnawing at her was justified. The response email was brief. "Terms accepted. We begin Monday." On Monday morning, Piper arrived at Stonewall Industries headquarters with 2 of her senior analysts. The reception area was sleek and modern, but what surprised her was the atmosphere. There was no sense of panic or defensiveness. Employees moved with purpose, their interactions easy and collaborative. Graham himself met them in the lobby. Dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored navy suit, he looked more like a focused engineer than a cornered CEO. "Ms. Locke," he said, his tone all business. "Welcome. My team is prepared to give you whatever you need." He led them to a dedicated workspace that had been prepared for them, a glass-walled conference room with state-of-the-art terminals and direct access to Stonewall's financial systems. As Graham turned to leave, he paused at the door. "The truth is in here, Piper. I hope you're as good at finding it as everyone says you are." The use of her first name was deliberate, and it unsettled her. This was not going to be the simple investigation she had anticipated. If you're finding this corporate showdown as compelling as we are, please show your support. Liking this video and subscribing to the Worthington Chronicles helps us continue, bringing you stories filled with suspense and unexpected connections. We'd love to hear where you're watching from in the comments below. Chapter 3. The First Crack. The first week of the investigation was a masterclass in professional tension. Piper and her team worked with surgical precision, their every move observed, through the glass walls of their conference room. Graham made a point of checking in daily, his demeanor always professional, yet Piper sensed he was studying her as intently as she was studying his company's records. It was during one of these visits that the first crack appeared in her certainty. She was questioning him about their ethical sourcing policies, her tone sharp with skepticism. "Your supplier code of conduct looks impressive on paper, Mr. Stonewall, but compliance reports suggest inconsistent enforcement. Instead of the defensiveness she expected," Graham responded with calm authority. "That's because you're looking at last quarter's data," he said, moving to the terminal beside her. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up a new dashboard. "We implemented a new AI-driven monitoring system 60 days ago. Real-time compliance tracking across all suppliers." He showed her the data, transparent, comprehensive, and utterly damning to her previous assessment. The inconsistencies she'd found were actually the system flagging and addressing issues in real time. "Your initial findings were correct," he said, his voice low so only she could hear. "But they represented a problem we'd already identified and were actively solving." Piper felt a flush of embarrassment, quickly masked by professional pride. "You should have led with this data." "I'm showing it to you now," he countered, his hazel eyes holding hers. "The question is, are you willing to update your conclusions when presented with new evidence?" The challenge hung between them, and for the first time, Piper saw past the CEO facade to the sharp intellect beneath. This was no figurehead. This was a man who understood his business down to the granular details. The following day, a planned site visit to a manufacturing facility forced them to travel together. Piper had prepared for awkward silence or continued professional sparring. She hadn't prepared for the thunderstorm that grounded all flights, stranding them in a near-empty airport lounge. As rain lashed against the panoramic windows, the professional barriers began to dissolve. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for a while, watching the storm. "It was my father," Graham said suddenly, his gaze fixed on the torrent outside. "The former executive you referenced in your accusation." Piper stilled, saying nothing. "He nearly ran this company into the ground," Graham continued, his voice tight. "Embezzlement, fraud, you name it. I spent the last 2 years rebuilding everything he destroyed." He finally looked at her. "That's why your accusation felt like such a betrayal. You were using his playbook to attack the very systems I created to prevent it from happening again." The raw honesty in his words struck Piper with the force of a physical blow. She thought of her own motivation, the reason she'd dedicated her life to corporate integrity. "My grandfather lost his life savings to a company like your father's," she said quietly. "He invested in what he thought was an ethical firm. They were cooking the books. He died broke and disillusioned." Graham's expression softened with understanding. "So, this is personal for you too." The storm outside raged on, but in the quiet lounge, something between them had fundamentally shifted. They were no longer adversaries, but two people who understood the weight of legacy and the importance of trust. When their eyes met this time, the connection was different, softer, more dangerous.
The air crackled not with hostility, but with a new, unsettling awareness that had nothing to do with corporate finance and everything to do with the few feet of space between them on the leather couch. Chapter 4. The Alliance. The storm passed, but the tension between Piper and Graham had transformed.
Back at Stonewall Industries, their interactions were now charged with a new energy. The professional sparring continued, but it was laced with subtle smiles and lingering glances that spoke of their airport confession. One evening, Piper stayed late, determined to reconcile a particularly stubborn set of figures. The office was quiet, the cleaning crew's distant hum the only sound. She was so focused she didn't hear Graham approach until he was standing in her doorway. "Still, chasing ghosts?" he asked softly. She looked up, surprised to find the floor dark except for the light from her office. "There's a discrepancy here I can't ignore," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "It's small, but it doesn't fit." Graham moved to look over her shoulder at the screen. "Show me." For the next hour, they worked side by side, their earlier ease returning. As they finally pinpointed the error, a simple transposition in an invoice, their hands brushed against each other, reaching for the mouse. The contact was electric. Piper froze, her breath catching. Graham's hand covered hers, his touch warm and sure. "Piper," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. This time, there was no pulling away. This time, Graham gently turned her chair toward him, his hands framing, her face as he leaned in. The kiss was tender, a question and an answer all at once. It was everything Piper had tried to deny: the respect, the attraction, the growing connection. When they finally parted, breathless, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the airport," he confessed. "Me too," Piper admitted, her heart soaring. But reality came crashing back. "This is complicated," she said, pulling away slightly. "It doesn't have to be," Graham insisted, his hands still gently holding hers. "We're both after the same thing, the truth." The next morning, Piper made a discovery that turned her world upside down. Buried in the financial records was a file she hadn't noticed before, one that seemed to directly implicate Graham in the very fraud she'd been investigating. Her heart sank as she read through it. Had everything between them been a lie? Summoning? Her courage, she confronted him in his office, the printed documents trembling in her hand. "Explain this," she demanded, her voice shaking. Graham's face paled as he read through the file. "This is a setup," he said, his voice tight with anger. "This digital signature, it belongs to David Miller, my former head of security. I fired him 6 months ago for incompetence." The pieces began to click into place for Piper. "He's framing you." "And doing a damn good job of it," Graham said, running a hand through his hair. "Piper, I need your help. You're the only one who can help me prove this. In that moment, Piper made her choice. Her instincts told her to trust the man she was coming to know, not the suspicious file. Okay, she said firmly. We'll do this together. Their secret alliance began that day. Working late after her team had left, Piper used her investigative skills to trace the digital trail while Graham provided insider knowledge of company systems and personnel. The chemistry that had once been adversarial now made them a formidable team, their minds working in perfect sync. During one particularly intense evening of research, Graham paused and took her hand. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for believing in me." Piper smiled, her heart full. "I believe in us." If you're enjoying watching this unexpected alliance turn into something more, please support our channel by liking this video and subscribing to the Worthington Chronicles. We love bringing you stories where trust triumphs over doubt. Let us know in the comments what you think of Piper and Graham's partnership. Chapter 5. The Betrayal Revealed. Working in secret, Piper and Graham became an unstoppable team. Late nights in his office became their new normal, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows as they pieced together the puzzle. Piper's brilliant analytical mind combined with Graham's deep knowledge of his company's inner workings created a synergy that quickly yielded results. "It's definitely Miller," Piper said one evening, pointing at lines of code on her screen. "He left a digital fingerprint even he didn't realize was there. But Graham? He couldn't have done this alone. He needed help from someone who knew exactly what I would be looking for." Graham studied the evidence, his expression growing grim. Someone who could plant evidence exactly where you'd find it. A cold dread settled in Piper's stomach. There was only one person who had that level of access to her investigation: Mark, her most trusted analyst and right-hand man for the past 5 years. The truth revealed itself over the next 48 hours. Mark had been working with David Miller, Graham's former security head. They had planted the false evidence, using Piper's investigation as their weapon. Mark's motivation was simple. He wanted Piper's job and believed taking down a high-profile CEO like Graham would secure his promotion. The night they uncovered the final piece of evidence, Piper sat in Graham's office, feeling devastated. "I feel so foolish," she whispered. "He played me perfectly." Graham came to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Don't," he said firmly. "You were the only one brave enough to question everything, even your own conclusions. You were the only one who kept digging until you found the real truth." Tears welled in Piper's eyes. "I almost destroyed an innocent man's company." "But you didn't," Graham said, his voice soft but sure. "You saved it. And you showed me what true integrity looks like." The next morning, they confronted Mark together. The confrontation was brief and brutal. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Mark confessed everything. He was escorted from the building by security, his career in ruins. In the aftermath, Piper felt strangely adrift. She had dedicated her life to rooting out corporate deception, only to discover it had been festering in her own team. Her confidence in her professional judgment was shattered. "I need some time," she told Graham later that day. "Everything I thought I knew about trust, I need to process this." Graham's eyes filled with understanding, but also with fear. "Don't. Pull away, Piper. Not when we've just found each other." But Piper, overwhelmed by shame and confusion, did exactly that. She retreated, convinced that Graham deserved better than someone who could be so easily deceived. If this story of betrayal and healing is resonating with you, we'd be grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the Worthington Chronicles. Your support helps us continue telling stories about rebuilding trust and finding strength in vulnerability. Let us know in the comments what you think Piper should do next. Chapter 6. The Grand Gesture. 2 weeks passed in a haze for Piper. The investigation was officially closed, with Stonewall Industries completely exonerated. Mark and David Miller faced criminal charges, but the victory felt hollow. Piper had thrown herself back into work at Lumina Solutions, but the spark was gone. Her confidence, once her greatest asset, had been shattered. Graham, meanwhile, was hailed as a hero. His company's stock soared to new heights, and the board offered him a generous new contract. yet he found little joy in the victory. The office felt empty without Piper's presence, without the late nights working side by side, without her sharp mind challenging his. He knew he couldn't let her retreat into self-doubt. He had to show her that he saw her not as someone who had been fooled, but as the woman who had the courage to uncover the truth, no matter where it led. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Piper was preparing to leave her office when Graham appeared in her doorway. He wasn't dressed in his usual CEO attire, but in a simple button-down shirt, his hair slightly messy from the rain. "Graham," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I have a proposition for you," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous energy she could sense in him. "But not here. Will you walk with me?" Curious, she agreed. They walked in comfortable silence to a nearby park, the rain having softened to a gentle mist. "Your work here is done," Graham began, stopping beneath a large oak tree. "But mine isn't. What we uncovered, the betrayal, the deception, it made me realize something. There are countless other companies facing similar threats, led by people who don't have a Piper Locke to help them see the truth." He turned to face her, his hazel eyes intense. "I want to start a new firm. An elite corporate integrity firm that combines your investigative brilliance with my strategic leadership. A true partnership, 50-50. We'll call it Lockhart and Stonewall." Piper stared at him, speechless. This wasn't a romantic plea or an attempt to comfort her. This was a business proposition that honored her skills, her mind, her everything she thought she'd lost. "Graham, Piper, you're the most brilliant, frustrating, and ethical person I've ever met," he continued, his voice filled with conviction. "My company is clean because of you. You didn't fail. You succeeded in the most difficult way possible. You proved yourself willing to question everything, even your own team, to get to the truth. That's not a weakness. That's the kind of integrity this industry desperately needs." Tears welled in Piper's eyes, but this time they were tears of healing and hope. He wasn't asking her to be his support. He was asking her to be his equal. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Graham said, taking her hands in his. "Say yes to building something new together. Say yes to a partnership where we can make a real difference." Piper looked into the eyes of the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and not been scared away. The man who valued her mind enough to bet his future on it. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Yes to the partnership. Yes to everything." If you're enjoying this story of redemption and new beginnings, we'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the Worthington Chronicles. Your support helps us bring you more stories about second chances and powerful partnerships. Let us know in the comments what you think of Graham's grand gesture. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. 6 months later, the offices of Lockhart and Stonewall gleamed with modern elegance and purpose. Glass walls reflected the bustling city outside, while warm wood and soft lighting created an atmosphere of both professionalism and welcome. At the center of it all, Piper stood beside Graham, greeting guests at their firm's launch party. The room was filled with industry leaders, former clients, and colleagues, all curious about this unprecedented partnership. Piper, in a sophisticated, emerald green dress, looked every bit the confident leader she had become again. Graham, standing protectively yet equally beside her, watched with pride as she charmed a group of investors. "To think," he murmured, leaning close so only she could hear, "this all started with you trying to destroy me." Piper's eyes sparkled with humor and affection. "I prefer to think of it as a hostile takeover of your heart," she quipped softly, earning a warm laugh from him. Later, as the party wound down, they stood together at the large window, looking out at the city lights. Piper's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "It's funny," she mused. "I spent my whole career building walls to protect myself. I never imagined the person I'd let inside would be the one I thought was my enemy." Graham turned to face her, his expression serious and full of love. "You're not just my partner in business, Piper. You're my partner in everything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I had a whole speech prepared, but it all comes down to this." He opened the box to reveal a stunning, elegant diamond ring. Will you make me the happiest man alive? Will you marry me? Tears of joy filled Piper's eyes as she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, oh Graham, yes. As he slipped the ring on her finger, the last of the walls around Piper's heart crumbled away, replaced by a love built on trust, respect, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the person who challenges us the most is the one who helps us become our best selves. We hope you enjoyed Hostile Takeover of the Heart here on the Worthington Chronicles. If this story of love and redemption touched your heart, please help us spread the joy by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing it with a friend. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and how our stories of love and success have brightened your day. Thank you for being part of our storytelling journey. Epilogue, 2 years later. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of Locke and Stonewall, illuminating the framed photos on Piper's desk. One showed her and Graham on their wedding day, laughing under an arch of flowers. Another featured the two of them standing proudly outside their new headquarters, the polished sign bearing both their names. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Graham stood there, holding 2 coffee mugs and their 2-year-old daughter, Chloe, who was babbling happily in his arms. Someone insisted on seeing her mama, Graham said, his eyes full of love as he handed Piper a mug. Piper took Chloe, kissing her soft curls before smiling at her husband. We were just looking at how far we've come. Graham came around the desk to look at the photos with her. From adversaries to partners and everything, he said softly, wrapping an arm around her. Their firm had become exactly what they'd dreamed of, a beacon of integrity in their industry. They'd taken on challenging cases, always guided by the hard-earned lessons from their own past. The trust and respect between them formed the foundation of both their marriage and their business, creating a life more beautiful than either could have imagined alone. We hope you enjoyed following Piper and Graham's journey from rivals to partners in Hostile Takeover of the Heart. If this story of love, trust, and second chances touched your heart, please help us share the magic by liking this video, subscribing to the Worthington Chronicles, and sharing it with someone who needs a beautiful story today. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and how our stories have brought joy and comfort to your life. Thank you for being the most important part of our storytelling family.